He would have justified not doing the test.
Yeah. Well, the thing that kind of bothers me is that they do those $3,000 worth of tests for labyrinthitis.
Yeah.
And
That's what
that's
I mean.
the second time they've done it.
Yeah.
Is it that unusual? I don't know.
How do you check for it, whatever you call it?
Labyrinthitis.
I mean, do you have to do all these things to find out if that's what you got?
No, and it's not the case that you do all these things to eliminate everything else, and then you're left with that.
Yeah.
That's not the case either.
But that's what they do.
Because what they did with me is they did it all, and then they did, Keith did this thing where you run the light in front of your eyes, and if your eyes do something,
Mm-hmm.
then it shows that you got this inner ear thing. And he said that, it's fairly easy to diagnose. But the doc that I had there didn't bother to look at me. He ran all these tests. But he didn't do a physical examination.
Well, I've said it a million times. They don't even know if you're male or female when they operate on you. Starting point. We've had several things this week. We've had the march, Islam. I've had a thing with Mary on tradition and family. I don't know what you want to throw in the hopper. Just as starting points, reference points.
I'm interested in all those things. And I'm interested at some point in doing some more on your history with this view as to, I don't mean right necessarily.
Well, all these things, I don't ever eliminate my experience.
No, I understand, but, and maybe that's the way it'll come is little pieces here and there. But I guess just keep in mind the history, because you've talked a little bit about expanding this at some point. And I think there's some other people who might be interested in having a discussion about things that matter. But I'd like to finish up some of the history. So that's just a push. Yeah, the Million Man March. What do you think?
Well, there's so much out there. Big themes, and pick one you like. Atonement. It's a big theme. Media is a big theme. Power is a big theme for me. Family, because we're talking about family when you're talking about men start living up to whatever you're supposed to be or do. Family is a big theme. Process as opposed to content.
Well, again, all those are interesting. Let me just throw out a reaction I had.
Go ahead.
Is that I was, the thing kind of came upon me. It was not something that the white community was all that aware of. Smacked in the face with it. And, from 9-year-olds dropping 5-year-olds out of buildings in Chicago. They had that trial this week as well. There's a lot that goes on in the poor black community that we have no answers for. You know, I mean, as a society, me as an individual, um, you know, there's no plan, no program. And so I saw this thing as a, you know, I tried to look at, you know, what it might be, what it might do later on, what it might do for the people who go to increase responsibility. You know, I mean, if professional black men, if the men who went there did something in that community, it's probably a whole lot more than you or I could ever think of doing. You know, it's again, it's the kind of grassroots up from the bottom. You know, you can't legislate so much of this stuff, and it's not legislation. So I was real hopeful. You know, I mean, who knows what'll come out of it, and whatnot. But it made people react. You know, it made all kinds of people, from Colin Powell, you know, who couldn't come because he had a book signing conference, but he sent Farrakhan a telegram saying he supported the purposes of the march, and then got on television and denounced, you know, Farrakhan's racism, but, you know, still praising the purposes and the people who come there and whatnot. So it made people grapple with some stuff. So anyway, that's kind of, you know, I mean, I talked to a couple of white people that day, you know, with kind of my enthusiasm about it over here in the title company and whatnot. And I got an inkling of their reaction was like, black men getting together. You know, that can't be good. You know what I mean? I mean, it was just kind of like, oh, that, you know, like, and then I was, my other reaction is I turned it on in the morning, looking for it on NPR, and I thought they'd have it on all day. And I don't know if they did or not, because I couldn't find it. You know, I mean, they didn't start it. Maybe because the march wasn't started when I turned on the radio, but it was like, well, why isn't this a big deal? You know, if there were
Started at 4 in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, if there were a million, you know, I mean, if anybody else was marching, they'd cover it all day long. I didn't quite understand it. Of course, it was on some of the TV stations we watched it. So anyway, that's my start on it.
Well, top of the head, I would say that whatever comes out of it, what you like, and a little hope there. The acting locally is separated from thinking globally, which I think will end up going nowhere.
It's a whole lot easier to go to Washington than it is to do what they say.
Well, I don't find, see, this is, gets redundant for me, but I'm sorry. I don't find whether it's Republicans, Democrats, black men, or socialists trying to figure out the what and why that's going on. Oh, how come, you know, the black family wasn't so fractured before the welfare state, right?
Mm-hmm.
Far from it. It was not violent before the welfare state. Far from it. We've always said through the civil rights period, it's a wonder that the black person hadn't violently acted. Instead, they've been passive, you know. And now we're having more and more of this violence. It's interesting, Kelvin got in trouble at Benjamin Franklin the other day for pounding on Leroy. another black kid. This may be off the wall, but right prior to that, some whites call him, "Hey, nigger," call him some names. And he didn't do anything. He just took it all in and internalized it. Black calls him, quote, nigger. Didn't use the word, but look out. It's interesting. The Brown, Rush Limbaugh makes, and others, makes the Brown, was the Brown Act or the school thing?
Brown versus Board of Education,
Yeah.
the court case.
As the turning point. And he makes that the good. And Farrakhan the bad. My biggest argument with him is making either one good or bad, but it was very interesting. I hope this isn't boring, but I remember a Urban Studies staff meeting where Lou Palmer, who comes on pretty hard sometimes, but there's always a half-truth behind it. And he couldn't say why, but he says the Brown versus Board of Education Act was the worst thing that ever happened in my community. Now, that's not liberalism. that's a no-no to say that. Even to Rush Limbaugh, You with me? And Lou didn't ask why I said it, or nobody on the staff did. They never wanted to hear me. I said, Lou, I couldn't agree with you more. But I will only add, the Brown versus Education Act was necessary. Now, I didn't get into it then, but the word necessity is very important to me. The word necessary has to do with survival. It's not creative. It's not life is more than bread, meaning life is more than survival. On the other hand, you can't choose life unless you survive. And liberals and the Rush Limbaughs the Rush Limbaughs only call it good when they see Farrakhan. Okay? We cannot look at things and see that they're both good and bad. We can't look at things in real terms. I kept saying all through the 70s and everything else, my students heard a little bit, but the outcome of that was the bus thing. Now, the black community wasn't enamored with the bus thing. The white community wasn't enamored with the bus thing. No presidential candidate was for the bus thing. No party was for the bus thing. But we had the bus thing. That was the law.
Well, it's interesting. Like Brown versus Board, busing came not out of the legislative branch, but out of the courts. It's out of the conscience branch.
But it wasn't there before.
No. It wasn't there before, and I don't want to lose the train of thought. But just to toss in there is that it wasn't the people that we elect that put in busing. Busing was a tough necessity, and it was only. The only people who had the freedom to do that, bad as it may have been in some ways, good as it may have been in other ways, was the court, because they're appointed, the Supreme Court, because they're appointed for life. And they don't have somebody that's going to throw them out of office. But
the court is, I don't want to get into it now, but the court is directly related to the state.
Absolutely. And it was good for the state.
And in spite of the fact that nobody wanted it, I'm exaggerating a little, but not a hell of a lot. Nobody wanted it. It destroyed, yes, you're right, Lou, it destroyed neighborhood schools. Whether it's Yugoslavian or black, it destroyed neighborhood schools. It destroyed that democracy. And instead, it destroyed having textbooks in which Poles could have a little history in their neighborhood school of Poles, you know. Instead, we now had one textbook for the whole school system, and it was efficient and cheaper, and so forth, and all that goes with that. That, incidentally, what I just said had a lot to do with busing. The fact that having separate neighborhood schools is very costly. Having separate books and textbooks is very costly. Letting neighborhoods decide these things is very costly. It's not efficient. But here, that's a perfect example of what a major thesis that I want to keep bugging people with is one time when the environment was a natural environment, technology was used to supplement that. Help us pick apples or something, okay? Today we're in a technical environment and we simply use raw materials from nature. That's about it. And set aside some space or wetlands or whatever, or people can feel like they're getting away to nature at Grand Canyon or something. It's totally reversed today. But the state, with the busing and the Brown for Education, the state grew and continues to grow, and politics wanes. Is wane the word? Goes down. We're seeing it today. Oh, politicians, oh, politicians, oh, politicians. Don't think for a moment the state isn't growing and controlling our lives more every day. In every field, including now the psychological and the sociological and everything else you can possibly name.
Mm-hmm. It's the bureaucratic portion.
Precisely.
That grows.
Precisely. The nation state grows. Politics goes down. And the biggest illusion in the world today is the political illusion. If we elect the right person, if we only had a real black man as president, at best, maybe we can't say too much against Clinton because he's better than the other one. I mean, Farrakhan saying, number one agenda item is 8 million people should register to vote. We're talking about an illusion. That's where they should go home and do their work. That's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. So their number one agenda, Jesse and Farrakhan, they said the other things too, but their number one agenda was register to vote and take control of your own destiny. That is so far removed from reality it ain't funny. And that's because we don't understand what's happening and why. And Lou had his finger on it. He didn't know why either, and he didn't want to know. He'd be the first to yell if there wasn't a Brown for Education Act. You know what I mean? But he did sense that from that moment on, my community was being destroyed. My families were being destroyed. Now kids throw kids out windows, being with the welfare state, which was necessary. I think Hilltop is necessary. That's the ballpark I put it in. And you know what I mean by that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's necessary. if I recall right, in the Tribune this morning, I didn't have a chance to read it, but they did an either or, if I'm not mistaken, in a nice way. They did an either or on the state or the bureaucracy, almost a negative, and private citizen stuff almost a positive. I have to relook at it. What people think of me as anti organization and institutions and so forth, when I'm trying to, I keep saying no to them, but you can't do it without both. You just can't. But the change can only come from the individual citizens. But to think you can get along without the state is a joke, any more than we can get along without cars. That world's gone of horse and buggy. And that's one area. Another area on the Million Man March is this atonement stuff. I didn't hear one word of atonement from Farrakhan. Had he see, I have a problem with the Ted Ludwigs and Little Senny on this kind of comparative religion stuff. Well, no Muslim would claim Nation of Islam is Islamic, you know. And, well, they do claim it, you know. They use Arabic and da 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 da, and the Nation of Islam, you know, and so when I was at Glenn the other day, I'm spouting a little bit. It didn't last long, and Betty Schaefer says, "Well, why are you so against Nation of Islam and Farrakhan?" I had to think for a moment, how am I going to answer her with one line?
Because that's all you're going to get.
That's all I'm going to get. That's all I got. And I had in mind, here's Ted sitting there, and Walt, and I had in mind, my God, they're going to say, that's not really Islam, you know. So I had to think hard. And, well, I said, whether or not you call Nation of Islam and Farrakhan a Muslim, Islam and the Nation of Islam have something very much in common. They both absolutize the law. And that sums it up for me. No, I have nothing against the law, but then I think back to here he is putting Christianity and Muslims and everything all in one package, you know, Farrakhan, his speech, and, you know, the great prophet Jesus, and probably half of the Christians thought, hey, that's pretty good, you know. Or different. He quoted a few things from the Gospels, but Christ was crucified because he did not absolutize the law. What are you doing healing on the Sabbath? Well, you just heard him. And all the Gospels are absolutely loaded. The number one target for Christ are the people who don't throw kids out windows. Quite the contrary, who adopt orphans and who take on widows, and the Pharisees. The really fine, upstanding people are the ones that really get clobbered in the Gospels. Get clobbered, you know. Christ is anti-morality. By morality, I mean absolutizing of the law. He's anti-morality. That is exactly the.
I got a problem with that characterization, but go ahead.
Yeah, what?
Well,
a system by which you're judging others and yourself.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah.
And Muslims are about that. The Nation of Islam is about that.
Sorry.
No problem. Just to give a metaphor or something, if I were to be, you've heard this many times, but if I were to be active in the Democratic Party or the Republican, but let's take the Democrats, somewhere along the line, very carefully, and this is an important point, it would have to be very carefully done. And that goes for the Farrakhan thing. I'm not about to say much on it, okay? I'd have to be very carefully done. The Democrats are about social justice. Which is a guarantee of Big Brother and sanctions. You're not going to have social justice without Big Brother and sanctions. And so if I were a Democrat, somehow or another, I quietly would like to move a little bit off of the good versus evil stuff. The Republicans on what they're doing right now is not all bad. And the Democrats are running on election today that it's all bad and we're the saviors, in the social justice thing. At what point does the truth come in? It is a hell of a problem. I think that because he's president, and the buck does stop there, and probably for other reasons, Clinton is saying some things that need to be said that might cost him. I don't know. I don't think it was just a faux pas when he said in his speech the other day that I made a mistake back there on raising the taxes. I don't know. Anyhow, what I'm trying to say is, how do you tell your friends in the Democratic Party, if you're a Democrat, that we can't go around saying we're going to have less government when we're going to have more government if we do these things? You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
But so absolutizing the law is where the two come together. They both openly talk it. Now the Christians openly do it. Christians openly absolutize the law, but they talk Jesus, God, Gospels, and Bible verses. You with me? In other words, they're hypocrites. They say one thing and do another. Both parties absolutize the law. Now, those black men really did become real fathers and do what they're supposed to do, that'd be all right. Now, the atonement thing, I'm just themes here. The atonement thing.
Yeah, I don't want to get to that, but is when you mentioned the other week that you thought Nation of Islam kind of thing was one of the most dangerous things going on. Is that because of the absolutizing of the law?
It's the same as nationalism. I said the two are the most dangerous religions in the world today.
Okay, but it's not a whole lot different than what Christians do, even though they don't say it.
Right. Oh, absolutely. But Christians, one thing here that I might have said before, but it's very important on the distinction between religion and faith, which I think we talked about once. But when you go to the Quran, you can read, when you read jihad in the Quran, you can see how one of them says that means kill the enemy physically, or the Shiites, Sunnites, or whatever say no, that's psychologically. You got to get rid of the evil one.
Mm-hmm.
One says you kill the evil one physically. Another one says you got to work it out another way. Now, stay with what I'm trying to get at. When you read the Quran, or Das Kapital, you can get different sects coming out of it, and understandably so. Okay? One interprets jihad, one interprets the fact that you're born pure. That's Islam. You're born pure by nature. It's only the infidels that corrupt you. And one interprets that as kill infidels, or put distance a different way. Okay? In the tracts and all the different sects of Marxism interpret Marxism this way, this way, this way. But what I'm getting at, you can go to the book and you can see where it's coming from. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah. That can't be done with the Bible. So how in the world do you take, in the Bible it says, small is beautiful, and I won't give all the quotes, but that's what it says, you know. How do you take that and conquer the world a la television or the Roman sword, you know? Conquer for Christ, kill all the Mayans for Christ, or the Muslims for Christ, and so forth. You're doing exactly opposite what the book says. You can't interpret it any other way. You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
That's very distinct difference. The faith we took, and that's what I wanted to mention on Islam too. And atonement and roots. Farrakhan went to the roots. Bullshit. He went to George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln. That isn't the roots. And we've talked before about how no way should this be an excuse for what so-called Christian countries did to black people in slavery. But prior to the 9th century, Christianity was known in the world, the known world, anti-slavery, anti-imperialism. That was their number one characteristic: anti-war, anti-slavery, etc. How did they go to an imperialistic, colonial, slave-ridden country? They went because the 9th through the 12th century, one major reasons, from the 9th to the 12th century, Islam had conquered most of Europe and dominated. I won't go into all that. We've done this a little before, I think. In a very reasonably short time, Islam went from North Africa to Madagascar, Zanzibar, and southern Africa and dominated imperialistically, colonialistically, and slaveristically all of Africa. And they discovered resources. Other than gold, the number one resource that they discovered was the slave trade.
Islam?
Yeah. This is before we had slaves. The slave trade to the east, and all the blacks you see today in the Far East come from this slave trade. In China, you don't see too many because the emperors in China insisted on that their black slaves all be castrated. We're talking about millions. The number one trade before gold for Islam was the slave trade to the Far East. The ports on the eastern coast of Africa are still there. The slave blocks and so forth are still there. They weren't heading for North America. And then the question that I've raised before is, how is it that a navigator with a couple of boatsmen could go ashore and bring back 10,000 slaves chained to his ship, without a shot being fired? The primary reason, there were black chieftains involved. I guess you'd call them Uncle Toms. The primary reason was that they were part of the trade practice and had been well organized, and the chief result of war between tribes was to organize the losers and the winners and make hay out of it. So that's no excuse for what we did. But if we want atonement, and we want to go back to the roots, Islam, you got a lot of house cleaning to do. We learn well from you. There are other things we learn from Muslims, good and bad. We learn mathematics. We learn the Greek philosophers from Islam. Where we got them was from Islamic scholars. The marriage of the state and religion was 100% directly related to from that Muslim period. And Charlemagne loved that divine ruling ship. And so here all our cardinals and crown princes and kings and everything else were related to the divine rule. That came from Muslims. We like that. Are you all right, George?
Yeah, well, I need to blow my nose.
You got a cold or allergies?
Yeah, that what you just said is difficult to say. If the first thing out of a white man's mouth in response to the, Million Man March is, if you're going to atone, you better atone for creating the slave trade black man, that's going to be hard to stomach. Hard for people to hear.
No, that's right. The truth always is.
And I like the way you said it. It's not the only truth.
Yeah.
It's not, it doesn't justify what we did.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're talking about atonement, which is personal, which is
mm-hmm.
It's personal, and if you're talking about atonement, and part of talking about atonement is, what if you direct it at whites, it's what did your race do? Then it's got to come back.
Yeah. See, if he just
way.
said, if he talked about, each person's personal atonement, and then you don't have to spend too much time doing this. But when you start pointing the fingers to Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln, come on, man.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to blame Whitey for the slave trade, then maybe you ought to look beyond that. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
I'm just still skimming.
Where do you get your history on Islam? Is that something you've studied?
Very rare stuff. Very rare stuff.
Well, I know almost nothing about it, like most Americans, I think, is that we keep ourselves fairly ignorant of.
And see, then you have to be very selective on top of it. And when I say rare, I mean rare, because this hasn't been researched, but by 2 or 3 people. History is horrible, what we got in our history books.
Well, it's mostly what we have in the history book is lies. I mean,
it's not in lies, George, but true history, you can't look at the past without looking at the present. And you can't look at the present without looking at the past. Now, most history books don't make zero of those two connections. You with me a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
Unless you make those connections, you're not doing history. We look at the Crusades today, the new historians, the new hermeneutic destroyers look at history today from our present day eyes and make judgments. The Crusades was about economics and so forth. That's bullshit. Anyhow.
Well, the thing that strikes me is that history is not the study of immutable facts that are known. It's like, oh, well, this is just what happened. History is always viewed from, I'm the seer, and that's the scene. There's always a perspective.
Yeah, but what's interesting to me is the word history is used by individual black men, young black men, old black men, Farrakhan, everybody, Jesse Jackson. We're making history today. What the hell are you talking about? History is simply a recounting of man's absurd deeds. Period. But anyhow, this all fits. I'm bouncing for a moment still. Incidentally, Mary Breland, for 3 years, has represented to me a gold mine in terms of resource. And I've bounced on it because I know I can get some top college students to spend time and do what you're doing with me. Here's this woman who knows and can tell stories about a South that even blacks don't know anything about. She is hardly a step ahead of slavery in that experience. She is Niggertown South, no running water, no heat, no plumbing. Tobacco fields is her whole life, and that's going to be our kids' whole life. 12 hours a day. A world which we know nothing about, okay? Here she is 4 years in Woodlawn, and all that went with that. Now she's in another society, an uppity, all-white community. 4 years. there are not many people that have had their foot into each one of those communities. And bridging is very important to me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
She's had it in all three. And so I've somehow, and then all kind of sub themes. She can't stand Greg's church. She can't stand Emmanuel. I want to know why. I think I know why, but I want to hear her stories on why. You know what I mean? If she's totally open. I think it's dynamite because Emmanuel isn't about to put on the table why. Neither is Greg's church. Emmanuel will just simply write it off because I've tried it on a few people as well. You know, we understand it's a big cultural difference. You know,
For sure.
well, problem, church folks, that's not supposed to be the bottom line for the faith. Black, white, slave, non-slave, free, non-free, gender. That's not supposed to be the bottom line, those things. And so it's not ever on the table, if you follow what I mean. Somehow or another, her words will be important on so many issues. She does not go to
Yeah. Walt was saying that Mary won't take money from the trustees, but will take it from him because he's a brother.
So for the last 2 years, I don't say much, you know. I mean, her previous experiences are so much a part of Mary you wouldn't believe, and I've talked a lot about it, I think, at other times. And I won't do it now. It's unbelievable. I've learned so much among the Alexanders are as poor as Mary, but they have a middle class training, education. And Mary has a slave training called tobacco picking. And I learned how even poor blacks put down other poor blacks because of their background, so forth and so forth. And I also learned the tremendous pride that the bottom has, being Mary in this case, and black men in the Million Man March. The pride, that's what that march was about to a great extent. It was a process and pride and feeling I'm somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But now in Mary's case, which is even more so maybe in a black man's case, I don't know. I'm not doing the things. I'm just trying. I think you can read a lot between the lines here. And that story has to be told. And I gave up on students because I know I could get good students, but this is too heavyweight. This is too big. Too many messages. And it's not just Lois reading a bestseller now called Gal about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I gave her that.
Oh. This is not that, and it's not the autobiography of Malcolm X. This is much more sociological. The three different communities and the breakdown in those communities, everything. Okay, there's an audience out there. So, accidentally or otherwise, Sheha Habert, I know her in Chicago. I don't know if you've ever met her.
Who's that?
Sheha. she's a young, relatively young, 37 or 8, black woman, married, family, uh, who's an artist, a playwright, writer, dramatist, all those things. Okay. And she's been asked by the university to help students and faculty who want to prepare for Martin Luther King Day, a different twist. And when I heard her name, I had gone to Dave Carrot to probe the Mary story, and he didn't particularly want to do it. But and then he told me that he has this woman come and say, he didn't even put the two together, but more the moment he mentioned her name and that she's coming here, I just lit up and to myself. So I grabbed her. I took her to the train afterwards and spent a couple hours with her after she did her thing here. And I also met Mary with her. And she is 90% going to do this. It means for a year, coming here every week for a year. But what was interesting, the only point I want to make on this right now on her, is when I took her to Mary, I hit it off with Mary because I'm a Southerner.
Mm-hmm.
There's no other way I can account for it. I mean, she'll tell me anything, and she has total trust in me, and it's because I'm a Southerner. I understand everything Mary's saying. For example, and I'll get back to Shiai. For over 2 years, I go into her house at night. It's pitch black. I don't make a judgment on it at all. And then I go to turn on the light, and I can't turn it on because there's no light bulbs in there. She takes them out. And then, so about 2 days before she came, I said, Mary, I want to be straight with you now. I'm always straight with you. I'm really curious. I've never said anything. But am I right? Is the reason that it's always black in your house at night, is the reason because you grew up that a light bulb, get that damn light out, meant money down the tube. And your electric bill today. Are those the two reasons? Because that's how you were brought up. Because I remember 10 years of zero income. Nothing like what you had, but I can remember, Walter, get that light out. and just to rub it in, Emma's sheets that are 72 years old. When we went to Fort Wayne, I would say, can we bend back the sheets now? And you got something for abrasions? Because for 72 years with starching and patching, she kept the same sheets, That world. And Mary laughed and said, that's it. She says, and I said, you do know that electric lights don't cost too much to keep on. And especially when you got kids that ought to be sitting down with coloring books or geography maps or reading or something, instead of the one thing they keep on in the darkness is TV. And she says, and she's open. She says, it's just such a powerful thing for that past, In everything it is. In everything it's powerful. And I said, well, unless you object, starting today, on the 20th, this is the 20th, I don't know, of each month, I'm going to give you $10. I'm Granddaddy Wall. We're going to live that word. You're using it. You're going to live it, okay? I'm giving you $10 a month. Over and above your electric bill, that will cover lights on at night. For the sake of the kids, we got to get them reading. She didn't fight it, And, but anyhow, the power of tradition, the power of the past. Young people today, and this is the important point that we've said many times, young people today prefer no reference points. They don't see anything good coming out of the past. They'll only laugh at the bent sheets and the no lights, you know. In a world today which is based on waste and not repairing anything. That's our world today. We're becoming a garbage heap. Repairing is out. Replacing is in, etc., etc., etc. And we would have much to learn. Mary's hooked with the past. You know, Mary and I talked a long time about it. She said, don't throw it all away. Half of it was good, you know. It's just that we're in a new world, and your kids are not going to pick tobacco. If they were going to pick tobacco, turn those damn lights out. Save your money. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But they're not going to pick tobacco. There won't be any tobacco picking jobs.
Machines.
Yeah, and but remember that past. It's very important not to have to want everything and desire everything that everybody else wants today, you know. And feels that they need to be somebody. But anyhow, here comes Shahai. And funniest thing happened. I said, we got 10 minutes before we have to leave for the train. I just want y'all to meet each other, because it's very possible to really be getting to know each other. And in those 10 minutes, those two women bonded like I never saw anything in my life. You can relate a little to this because you're Southerner. But Shihai was born and raised poor in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
My God, for the next 10 minutes, they're talking about chickens and pigs and why they put rings in pigs' noses and so forth. And I mean, how you kill the chickens. I mean, they were bonding. They were living those old days like you wouldn't believe. It was amazing. Here's this professional woman, you know. It's just like she hadn't had this for a long time, you know.
Mm-hmm. Why do they put rings in pigs' noses?
Because when they hit any kind of fence, it hurts, and they go away from it. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, see, this could be in the book. We're a lot to learn. But somehow or another, I don't know how much. See, I don't know how much. I'd love to get my major themes exercised in there, but I won't have anything to do with it. But how from all these little stories we can respect that half of the past was very important for us to be listening to.
I think you can do it. I mean, there's a way to, you don't have to do with writing whatever gets written, but to sit down and say, here's why I think it's important.
I could have a session with Jihad separately.
That's right.
Once a month or something. Just some major themes. If you don't believe it and you don't like it and you don't see it happen, forget it. But don't discount what I'm saying automatically.
Yeah.
No, I think maybe there is a shot. I hadn't thought of this before.
As a way, because, what holds that together? I mean, I don't know what kind of a book Gal is. I picked it up because of the stuff that was sitting on the shelf there, it seemed interesting.
Well, that's stuff that people don't know about.
That's right, and it's a apparent. I bought the book. I was going to read it, and Lois was looking for a book, and I gave it to her. So I'll read it when I get it back. But it seemed like it was about the experience of a poor black woman.
Mm-hmm. That's what it was.
And
history.
And
her history.
And sometimes that's done without any reference points,
mm-hmm.
without any theme, without any.
I don't think it has too much of it.
Yeah, and that was my guess when I read the first few pages, but I don't know. I mean,
and that's a lot. That's important. But I think I'm looking at this book as having another dimension. Go ahead.
That's right, absolutely. I mean, I look at well, it's like what we were saying about history. History is not just the facts, man.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it always comes from a perspective, mm-hmm. from a reference point, from a point of view,
mm-hmm.
and you know, to pretend that you're neutral
mm-hmm.
when you tell this history,
like every prof does, and
is bullshit.
Absolute bullshit.
I mean, one of the things, and I told you this before,
and we're proud of that as professors.
One of the things I appreciated about Richard Stiff is that he had a perspective. Mm-hmm. He came from somewhere. He had a whole concept mm-hmm. that he had thought through clearly, mm-hmm. logically, over many years. And I could disagree with him and not like some of the things he does, but I had to respect that every time he said something, it came out of a core that was him, that he had thought through, that, you know, applied in all of his life as best he could do it as a human being.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more.
And people hate him because in the law school, because he's that anti-abortion guy. And, you know, that pro-life guy or whatever. But that comes out of his religious...
And one should take his perspective seriously and see where it's flawed.
That's right. See where it's flawed and if it's flawed. But he takes his perspective and it comes out of his religious beliefs and out of where he thinks the moral force of law comes from, which is ultimately religious, not man. You know, I mean... And that's a big debate in the legal community is, you know, does the law have any moral force or is it just a bunch of rules? And so I think, you know, it's even Studs Terkel doesn't just give you the facts.
Mm-hmm.
He wraps it.
No, that's right.
He wraps it in here's this as opposed to this. Here's this person's words as opposed to this person's words, talking about something. That's a theme, and I think that's...
No, I'm glad you pushed it, because I'm going to, if she does this job, I've put too much into it. By into it, the whole package, you know, mm-hmm. To just respect me for a few moments each month, on a couple of things, you know.
Because that can make all the difference.
It could. It's possible. It really could.
You know, in terms of, you know, you can tell a life story in so many different ways. And so many of those ways are just hollow. To wrap it in some themes that mean something to people is.
I think I'd like to do that. I have to go early today.
That's fine.
What we didn't get too much is the instrument of power called media, and what really dictated everything that took place at the Million Man March. That evil media, which they totally kowtowed to. Even how many? The media dictates it all.
Yeah, I heard talking about it this morning on NPR as I was getting up, and the commentator was a black commentator. I don't know who. Somebody I've heard before. You know, and then we got, you know, we're talking about the Million Man March and debate on, you know, how Colin Powell responded to it, and he says, and the other debates about, you know, how many people showed up if that really matters, and I don't think it does. You know, and I thought that was refreshing to have the commentators say, you know, here's this big media debate, if it matters, and I don't think it does, you know, because everybody's got an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And they put the facts out as if they don't have an opinion, when in fact, you know, their opinion may be it really does matter how many people.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's fine. Well, that's fine. We can
Okay.
pick up. What else did you say you were going to say was left off?
Well, the media and power. Power is very important. The family a little bit more on that.
Process versus content. I'm not sure we finished up with atonement. There was a real chance there for Farrakhan
Oh yeah.
that he just didn't see or didn't care to. Was too proud to.
He couldn't.
Probably just that's probably right. He couldn't.
He couldn't. I think he was keenly aware of the chance. I think he was trying to get to everybody. I think he knew the media and the power of the media, and he did the best he could.
That he couldn't bring himself to do more.
He wouldn't know anymore. He doesn't know. A world in which the bottom line is love instead of law. He doesn't know that world. That's not many people do. It's a whole different world. And the law is so powerful that Christians are living it, practicing it, period.
Right.
So what's up today?
I don't know. I can't say it. Well, I was thinking about